Hey folks, Dust here, and I want to discuss Valve adding Vertigo into the competitive map pool in place of Cash and talk about some of the controversy and things surrounding this decision. And a lot of this video is actually going to be in-game and me kind of talking about the map, but I did want to hit a couple of points before I did jump in-game. So first and foremost, I personally, just to let you know where I'm at, most people kind of know this if they follow me on social media, I am kind of somewhat on the fence about the map as far as it being added, but I'm definitely way closer to being on the negative end than the positive end. I'm not way off the deep end on the negative side, but I'm certainly much further away from positive. And the reason for that is that I just feel like the map has some really big issues, and I just think that the foundation of the map isn't nearly as good as it needs to be. Obviously, changes can always be made to make a map good enough for competition, but there's a lot of different factors involved, and how long it takes you to do it can also be a really crucial thing you have to think about. And my main argument is I don't think Vertigo should have been added, simply because I think Cash has a better foundation than Vertigo does, and or there are several other community maps that would have had a better foundation to work from than Vertigo. Yes, those other maps are flawed, but they are less flawed than Vertigo, and at least the overall philosophy of the map, the overall layout, the core of it has a better, again, foundation that you can build from when you're making changes to get it to a level that's going to be quite good on the competitive circuit. Now, with that in mind, obviously, these are just initial impressions. Obviously, we haven't seen top 10s compete on the map. We don't know what meta they might develop or what things they might come up with. We're working from a place very much of speculation because it's just limited to our experiences playing matchmaking, and that's really it, right? Because we haven't seen any play on it yet. So, again, you're going to have to take some opinions with a grain of salt because of that. But I do think that there's some kind of core things you can know about a map if you've been involved in the competitive scene for a long enough time or watched enough competitive Counter-Strike. Certain kind of key themes that you think about when you think of a map that's going to be good for competition. So, also factor that in whenever you're kind of listening to opinions from others as they come out. And really, again, the conclusion for me, and I'll explain some of this whenever I get in game and start running around the map, is that I just feel, you either could have kept Cash, you could have gone for some other community maps that have been made. So some other maps from Pwn, like Sub-Zero or Santorini even, have better foundations than Vertigo, in my opinion. And there's even some other community maps, if you want to give some shine on another designer. I think maps like Abbey and Biome and maybe a couple of others also had better foundations than Vertigo. And or I think you could have brought back an old school map. I mean, yeah, some people might argue that's not really new, but at least it would be new to people who have only really played CSGO and don't really have much experience with previous versions of Counter-Strike. And so it would still be something fresh to the map pool because we'll be bringing back a map that people haven't competed on in a very long time. Like many of these players, for example, haven't competed on Tuscan in ages. So bringing a Tuscan remake will be a great way to kind of do a throwback to a map that has a lot of history in Counter-Strike. And there's other maps as well you could think about, not just Tuscan. That's probably the most popular. I think there's a couple of Counter-Strike source maps that I personally really liked coming up through there, like Contra and a couple of others, like Ruska maybe even, that also had some value that I think were really neat. And so, yeah, I think that could have been a better option than Vertigo as well. So I just think that's my main hitch on this map, is that there's just better options that with better foundations, and maybe some of those maps I've mentioned like Abbey and Biome are a bit flawed. Of course they're going to need tweaks just like Vertigo does, but they need far less tweaks in my opinion than Vertigo. I think there's some really core problems with Vertigo that I don't know how you fix it. And then some people will point out that, well, Overpass was the exact same way. It had a lot of major issues. A lot of people had a lot of backlash in that map when they got introduced to the pool, but I would argue that the foundation of Overpass way back when was still much better than the foundation that Vertigo has. And that really is because the only major changes that had to happen to Overpass to make it viable was kind of opening up the A-bomb site by opening up Bank and kind of just making it less claustrophobic on the A-bomb site, and then changing the positioning of Connector and eliminating one of the routes next to Monster to get into the B-bomb site. That's really the only major changes that took place to Overpass. It just was a better starting point than what Vertigo's starting from. That doesn't mean that Vertigo can't be edited to be good, but how long is it going to take? And so how long does competition suffer playing an inferior version of the map until a good version comes out? When so many people's careers are on the line, you really have to kind of think about that. And what I will address, and this is the last thing I'll do before we start talking about the map in game, is that what I dislike seeing, or hearing, I guess I should say, well both because it can be written, is when people hear that someone disliked the idea of Vertigo being to the map pool, they kind of resort to two different arguments to kind of counter it. And one is, oh, you just don't want anything new. You're stuck in your old ways, and you're a traditionalist, and you don't want anything new. And every time you call for something new, if you did want something new, you immediately complain about it. And they really use that argument about how you just won't accept anything new. And I think that that's just a really big generalization. And I think it's not that we don't want something new. Again, I've kind of talked about how it would be cool to have a new map. Some of the other community maps are better than Vertigo. Or, you know, bringing back an old school map but remade is still something new to a lot of people in CSGO, and still would be new to many of these players who haven't competed on it in a long time, especially if there was some tweaks to it. So it's not that I'm against something new, and I think many people are kind of the same way. I don't think that there's very many people out there who just will never accept anything new no matter how good it is. No, it's just that we want something introduced that has a much better foundation, that doesn't take as many changes to get to an optimal point, and doesn't impact competition, you know, then basically, right? And the other big thing you have to think about is that Valve does have a pretty poor track record on being speedy and making tweaks that are needed to make something good. And so some of the changes they make can really impact the game negatively for a while before it gets the edit it needs to get it to where it needs to be more generally accepted and more viable for competition. You know, the CZ and the Tech 9 are two big examples of this. Those were wreaking havoc for months and months and months before they finally got to a level where they were kind of taken care of, right? It took a really long time to get that done. And so when you think about that and you see a new map come in, you get a little bit worried that that's going to happen again, right? Now, the other argument I've heard about people, you know, arguing against people who dislike Vertigo is that, oh, you haven't even tried it. You don't even know anything about it. You haven't even seen it. That's not true either, right? I mean, I think a lot of people have probably played it to some level of matchmaking, and you probably are on equal footing with them on experience on the map, because ain't nobody got a lot of experience on it, right? And ain't nobody seen the top competition on it. So we're all kind of working from speculation in that way. So it's not really fair to use that argument either. But without further ado, I'm going to get into Vertigo and kind of talk about some of the key issues I have with it, and I'll point out a couple of positive things as well that could be worked from, and then kind of conclude the video there. So stay tuned. All right, so now that I've set some context for my thoughts on this map and everything that's going on around it, we are now in the map to actually talk through some of the details of it. And so I'm going to point out some of the things that I feel are really negative about the map. I'll also point out a few positives, and then we'll just kind of take it from there. A couple of things off the top that I want to explore before I go to each specific bomb site and some of the specific map locations is that, in general, this map has some huge issues that verticality brings to any map in CSGO. I mean, we obviously know this occurs in Nuke, for instance. One of which being the sound. When you're running around throughout the map, there's obviously two main floors that are right stacked on top of each other, and so sound can be a huge issue, particularly in mid to late round situations when you're trying to make a rotation or try to pull off a clutch, or just, you know, mid round situations in general. I feel like when you're hearing footsteps, you can't really tell where they are. And again, I know that this is an issue on Nuke, but it feels way more exaggerated on this map. It feels way worse. And yeah, there might be some potential solutions to this, such as changing the surface of the floors on each level to try to make them distinguishable, or maybe there's some other solutions, but for right now, it's actually a mess when trying to play mid or late round situations on this map, depending on which floor you're on and what you're dealing with. It definitely is a big problem. Another big problem with map verticality is that it's really difficult to spot things out on the mini-map. Now, this can be a problem for people playing the game who are trying to assess where their teammates are at a quick glance. It also is a problem for observers to try to figure out where people are when they're trying to spectate a game for a broadcast. And it also makes it difficult for commentators who are trying to use the mini-map to gain quick information while they're focusing on a first-person perspective of someone that they're commentating. They might want to quickly glance at the mini-map and have an idea of where other people are to kind of understand what situations might unfold, or just kind of prepare themselves for what to expect. And so that is obviously going to be another big problem with verticality on this map, is going to be how the mini-map works. Another big theme that you're going to hear me talk about throughout my talk of each location of the map is this general idea of claustrophobia. This map is really small, in my opinion, compared to most maps. The way that certain areas of the map are laid out, it just feels like it's really claustrophobic. And because of this, I feel like this concept of the map being too claustrophobic really limits strategy in a lot of different ways. And so to go more into this, a map like Cache, which got removed to bring this map in, or say a map like Mirage or a map like Inferno, they provide for many different ways to attack the map. I mean, you can play a slow, methodical map control style of play, or say on Cache, you know, you're getting control of middle, you're staging up at A main, maybe you're getting some checkers room control, and you're not really committing to anything just yet, but you're getting some map control, you're causing rotations, you're creating pressure, maybe getting entries, you're setting yourself up. Same can be said for something like Mirage, getting mid control, or something like Inferno, getting, you know, control of top middle and top banana. You know, this is a style of play where you just take control, you make mid-round decisions, and it's a little bit more methodical. There's set protocols in place. There's a lot of flexibility on what could happen from that point forward. But you could also play a looser scrimmy style where you just make quick contact plays and you just try to trade frag and do simpler things to try to just flex individual skill to find openings. Or you can do set pieces, and this can range from the most elaborate, where there's Molotovs and smokes and flashbangs everywhere, and it's really surgical, and you could tell that it has to be really well drilled and a lot of preparation, maybe even innovation on what utility gets used. We've seen over time, you know, different smokes get figured out or different nade stats get figured out, and strategy really develops off of that. But you could also have really simple ones, which is kind of a pop, flash, and go. And you can do it at different points in a round. You can do it early round, mid round, late round. So there's so much flexibility and strategy on pretty much the entirety of the map pool. There's no really one way to play any map. Now on this map, that probably also can be true, but I feel like the construction of it does make it a little bit difficult. Just because there really is no map control on this map, if that makes sense. Not in the traditional sense. There's nothing comparable to getting mid control on Cache or mid control on Mirage or top Banana, top mid control on Inferno. There really is none of that, or outside control on Nuke even. There really is nothing like that on this map. The closest thing is this room I've been walking around in as I've been kind of ranting on. This is, for all intents and purposes, mid, I guess you could say. Because what mid gives you is, as terrorist, access to this window, which gives you the only other route into B other than the main stairwell. So getting control of this area of the map is important for terrorists to add that extra route to get into this bomb site. And in theory, once you get control of this area, you can also then push through this stretch of the map and kind of take control of this and then look to backstab A. But to me, this isn't the same as a connector on Mirage from mid to A, or Highway, for instance, on Cache from mid to A. It doesn't really have that same feel, mostly because while this general area is quite claustrophobic, the actual run you have to make from here all the way around to the A bomb site is quite long. So it feels less like map control and an added route to the A bomb site, and more just a flank through CT spawn, essentially, which it pretty much is. I mean, you're crossing right in front of CT spawn to make this move. It'd be more comparable to, I don't know, let's say getting control of Art Shot on Inferno and running through CT spawn and using that to split the B bomb site from Banana and that. That's what this feels like. Which on top of this just being like really only 2 routes in the B, it means that there's just way less options, I feel like, for terrorists, just overall. Now, we'll talk a little bit later about how the A bomb site is actually kind of T-favored and the B bomb site's a little bit CT-favored, so there's a little bit, I guess, of balance between sidedness on each site. But in general, it just feels like there's no actual map control, and what this means is that I feel like strategy is a little bit limited. I feel like this map is going to be a lot more reliant on fast contact play and faster set pieces rather than having any type of slow play potential. Now, I could be totally wrong. Maybe teams will figure things out. Again, we haven't seen top teams play it, but that's just the kind of general feel I get. I mean, I guess outside of going for, you know, mid control, as I've shown there, the only other thing I can think of is controlling this ramp area and pushing CTs back into the A bomb site. You're not that committed to A just yet, so you could indeed fall back, and so this could be a type of map control, just getting control of this ramp area. But, I mean, once you get to here, you're pretty much already to the site. So, again, it doesn't really feel the same as, say, a mid-control or something like that on other maps. So, again, the strategy does feel a little bit limited. Also, another thing is going to be that because of the map size, opping is very, very much limited, and I don't like the idea of map construction dictating that type of meta. Some people might be happy that opping isn't going to be as prevalent on this map and may think that it's a breath of fresh air. But I think that 5-rifle setups already have their place in CSGO depending on the style of team, the map, the economic situation, things of that nature. There's already so many factors that dictate what guns people will use that I don't really like map construction being a part of it. You know, I do feel like there needs to be a little bit more openness on this map to allow for A, you know, more strategy to take place, but B, also to maybe have more access to using AWP. I mean, right now the only places that I feel like an AWP can be useful is this A ramp stretch area. I mean, if a CT can, you know, get over to this, I guess, catwalk area, then, you know, you might have some op duels that take place around here that can be pretty fair, or maybe a CT just playing back here, watching the site, watching, you know, T's come up here can be another place where an op, I guess, could take a fight, but obviously they can pretty easily get smoked off. So yeah. And also, while I'm here, another thing I don't like about this map, why the fuck are there spots where you can just fall off and die? If someone tries to argue with me that that's some type of skill-based thing and then that's totally fine, then, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but to me, that just doesn't make any sense to have in a map. You know, no other map has that other than cratering from fall damage, so I really don't like the idea that you can fall off and die. Granted, I guess there's most of the places you can fall off and die are pretty easy to avoid, and so it probably won't play a factor, but the fact that there's even a small chance it could have an impact on the game, to me, is still too much. Now that we're actually over here, let's talk about B. I think this approach to B is really, really awkward for terrorists. You know, for one, the ramp isn't that wide, so it doesn't provide for a lot of flexibility of movement. I mean, you can pretty easily just fall off in the middle of a gunfight if you're trying to strafe back and forth while you're shooting or something like that. Also, just depending on the timing, it's a real neck crane to fight your way uphill on the speed bomb site. And for this to be the main way in, and for it to be that weird of an approach, I don't really like that. I think some potential solutions could be to drop the elevation of this floor just a little bit. Maybe instead of it being, you know, here, maybe drop it to, say, here. So just drop the elevation of the floor a little bit. And then maybe just have something a little bit wider. Instead of just this one stairwell, maybe have two of them. Or maybe just make this stairwell wider. I don't know, just to provide a little bit less of a neck crane when fighting uphill. And to provide a little bit more flexibility of movement as you're approaching the site. Again, I mostly say this because this is the main way into the site. And while it is kind of a wide choke point once you get up these stairs, it is just, you know, the way timings can work unless you're doing something really fast with a good spawn. You know, CTs can definitely have this kind of worked out, and you're just fighting, you know, at a disadvantage all the time. So I do think that this approach is a little bit awkward. And then in general, like I said, once you get in here, really claustrophobic bomb site. Not a lot of space, a lot of things that you have to clear. That's the other thing. There's so many angles and spots that you have to clear as you're making progress that it just is really odd. And I guess that maybe you get more time to do that because the map is so small and you can attack a little bit faster, so that can kind of make up for it. But yeah, I will say this, at least there's not a crazy amount of clutter. Like, there's just, you know, normal boxes, normal things to hide behind. There might be a couple little things that you get caught on and stuff like that, but in general, it's not too cluttered, and so that can be one positive. But again, I think it's just still a little bit too close quarters. I think the approach is still a bit too awkward. And then obviously the verticality angle comes into play as well. So that's kind of that. So yeah, the next area to talk about is something I've already kind of mentioned, which is what is considered, I guess, mid or main. I'm not sure what you'd want to label it as, but this is the closest thing to mid as possible. And I think that, again, this is just a really claustrophobic area of the map. I feel like a lot of it is going to be terrorists trying to run up, you know, maybe throw some type of flash off this wall to help them come out. And then they're going to have Molotovs that they might use to try to flush people out of this corner or to throw behind this orange dumpster or sandbags. And there's going to be kind of this headshot angle fight. CTs will definitely play behind these sandbags. You'll have a little bit of a fight here. And then, yeah, like I said, as a terrorist, you can definitely throw certain Molotovs, certain flashes through this little window that helps you get out. And so that's all fine and dandy. Then for the CT side, though, you can pretty easily, you know, bank smokes off this or up here somewhere, or flashbangs or incendiaries and kind of block off this choke point. Obviously, that one wasn't lined up the best, but I did it very much on the fly. It's going to be pretty easy to find things. And maybe over time, people will even discover certain nades that you can throw even from, you know, like back here before you even start. But in general, I just feel like this is super close quarters. And again, once you get control of it as a terrorist, the only thing you really gain access to is this. And even this can be a little bit awkward of a second approach into B. And then, again, this is a long flank around for it to be a second route to the A bomb site. So I just feel like, again, this limit strategy, it's too close quarters, a little bit too scrappy. And even as terrorists wanting to use this stretch, again, you have to clear so much. You have to worry about people here. You have to worry about people behind this. You have to worry about, you know, people there. There's just a lot. I don't know that I really like this whole mid area at all. Now, the one area of the map that I actually do think is pretty good, obviously could still use some tweaks, but I think there's at least a good foundation here, is going to be the A-bomb site. Obviously, terrorists do have a pretty good advantage coming up. I feel like a lot of the timings I've seen, it seems like terrorists are able to get pretty close to where I'm at right now before CTs can actually run all the way around and take a peek if they want to actually swing out this way. Usually terrorists can, like I said, kind of get to here already, and so they can actually have a pretty good advantage on timings. I don't have a perfect take on timing, so there might be some instances where maybe a CT could get here as T's are rounding the corner, but it feels like if T's really commit to it, they can definitely start making their way up here before CTs can come here. Unless CTs have a really good spawn, and instead of swinging wide, they come this direction and take a peek, then maybe it's a little bit different. But in general, I think that this actually is pretty neat. I mean, you have a pretty wide open area to work with. You have, you know, the scaffolding where you can take two different levels of elevation to take a peek, as well as just swinging up this way. Once you do that, I mean, once you clear these sandbags, you've pushed CTs back into the site a good bit. And as a terrorist, you don't have to commit all the way to the site. I mean, there's some very natural smoke grenades that you can throw either from inside the scaffolding or in this corner or something like that that is going to land in locations like here, or if you want to throw further back, you can. Obviously, Molotov and stuff as well, where you can really not even capture the full bomb site, still get a plant, and then be able to fall back and take post-plant positioning behind these sandbags, or even as far back as watching the flank, but being able to quickly drift this way and kind of take peeks. So it definitely plays out pretty interesting. I would say that this side of the map is definitely a little bit more terrorist-friendly than the B side of the map. If anything, I think they actually have a pretty decent advantage here because you don't need to commit all the way to get a bomb plant, and you have a good amount of space, and you have a good timing, and you can use good utility to force CTs back into the site or maybe even further back. So I actually see a lot of potential on this A side of the map. This is actually probably my favorite area of the map as far as the potential it has with, you know, some small tweaks. I mean, I think the setting is neat. The environment's cool, other than being able to fall off and die potentially. So I actually give this side kind of a thumbs up. Again, there needs to be some tweaks and some bugs fixed and things like that, but I think there's actually at least a good foundation here. But again, that's where I think it ends. I think the foundation of this map, kind of everywhere else, is a little bit rotten. I don't know what changes you could really make. Again, I talked about how maybe you could change the B approach a little bit to make it a little bit less awkward by maybe changing the elevation just a little bit and widening the room that you have to move to actually get into the site. But when it comes to the middle area and elsewhere, again, it just feels so claustrophobic. I'm not even sure what changes you can really make to deal with it. Also, the issues that verticality brings with sound, the mini-map, observing, you know, information for your teammates or yourself, all that can be something that's really challenging that, again, I'm not sure how you solve. Again, it just all comes back to my main point that it's not that Vertigo can't be good. It's not that there can't be changes to this map that gets made that eventually gets it to where it needs to be a good competitive map. But is it really worth it when A, there's other maps out there that have better foundations to build from, whether it be keeping cache, whether it be other community maps like Abbey and Biome, whether it be bringing back an old school map like Tuscan but remade. You know, all those ideas have better foundations than Vertigo, which means it's going to be way easier to get it to a competitive level, which also in turn means that you're going to impact the community negatively for a less period of time. You know, how long does Vertigo take to get to a really good level competitively? How long is that going to impact competition then on our way there? And how big of a problem is that going to be? Those are all questions you really have to consider. So again, I think Vertigo could have some potential. I see some on the A-bomb site. I think maybe with some cool tweaks it can be big, but I feel like you're fighting an uphill battle with the whole verticality aspect. If you're going to keep it close quarters, I think that's going to be limiting on strategy. And again, I just think there's better options out there with better foundations. So that's kind of where I'm at. Hope you folks enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe for more content. Catch you next time.